Fleet Commander Vesik Thal had seen humans die exactly once before, and it had ruined his appetite for 3 cycles. This was worse. The human wasn't screaming. That was the part his mind kept snagging on, over and over, like a claw catching on a torn membrane. Half of the crew compartment was open to hard vacuum. The atmosphere had left in 9 seconds, according to the ship's log. The human, designation, Petty Officer Elena Cruz, Terran Star Navy, had exactly 4 seconds to reach the emergency bulkhead before the decompression alarm even finished its first tone. She made it in 3. Then she turned around, braced her boots against the buckled deck plating, and pulled 2 unconscious crewmates through the gap before she sealed it behind her. Vesik watched the recording 17 times before he called the council. 3 weeks earlier, none of this had seemed possible. The Confederated Systems had cataloged Earth for 112 years before they finally spoke to it. This was standard practice. You did not rush first contact with a species that had, in the span of 2 centuries, gone from burning coal to splitting atoms to arguing about whether machines could think. Humans were flagged in the Confederation archives under a designation that translated roughly to promising, but do not startle. The Confederation itself was old, older than human agriculture, older than human language, in some branches older than human fire. It was a loose alliance of 41 species spanning 9,000 systems, built on the founding principle that had kept them alive for 11,000 years: avoid escalation. Every species in the Confederation had, at some point in its adolescence, nearly wiped itself out. The Council of Elder Species existed specifically to make sure nobody did that twice, and to make sure new species didn't do it to each other. Vesik Thal was 31 years old, which made him young for a fleet commander, and he had been selected for the first contact assignment precisely because of that. The Council wanted someone humans could relate to, someone without 3 centuries of caution baked into his bones, someone who might actually like them. He did, almost immediately. The first transmission from Earth wasn't a greeting, it was a question. This is Commander Aditi Rao, Terran Deep Space Monitoring. You've been in a stable orbit beyond our asteroid belt for 6 days. We've run the numbers on your drive signature. It's not ours. It's not anyone's we've seen. So, who are you, and do you need help? Vesik had stared at that message for a long time before answering. Every first contact protocol in the Confederation archive assumed the receiving species would be startled, defensive, perhaps hostile. None of them accounted for a species whose first instinct, upon detecting an unknown alien warship parked 6 days from their homeworld, was to ask if the aliens were doing okay. He would learn, much later, that Commander Rao had already ordered 3 defense fleets to battle stations before sending that message. Humans, he came to understand, were capable of extending a hand and clenching a fist at the exact same time, and considered this neither strange nor contradictory. It was simply prudent. First contact went well. Better than well. Within 4 months, Earth had a seat, a provisional one, pending the standard 100-year evaluation period, on the Confederated Council. Human ambassadors were, by unanimous and slightly bewildered consensus, charming. They apologized constantly, laughed at things that weren't funny yet, and asked an alarming number of questions about weapon systems, which they insisted was just due diligence. The Confederation had rules about new species: no military integration for at least 50 years, no access to Confederation core technologies for 20, no participation in joint fleet operations. Full stop. Not up for discussion. Not for a species that had invented the atomic bomb less than 2 centuries after inventing powered flight. Humans said they understood. Humans smiled and nodded and said that made sense. Humans kept building ships anyway. Their own ships. Slower than Confederation vessels, cruder, powered by reaction drives that made Confederation engineers wince, but fast, and getting faster every year, in a way that made several older species deeply uneasy, in a way they couldn't quite articulate. They're not being hostile, Vesik told the council, the 3rd time the topic came up. They're being human. There's a difference. Explain the difference. said Counselor HFY, a Thralin elder whose species had not built a weapon of any kind in 6,000 years. Because from where I sit, it looks the same from either direction. Vesic tried. He failed mostly, because the truth was he didn't fully understand it himself yet. Humans didn't build ships because they expected a war. Humans built ships because building ships was what you did while you were deciding whether there was going to be a war, so that if the answer turned out to be yes, the deciding wouldn't take very long. It was, he would later realize, the exact same instinct that had made Commander Rao send battle fleets to stand by before she sent a friendly greeting. Hope for the best. Prepare for the rest. Do both at the same time, without seeing any contradiction in it at all. The trouble started at Outpost Ilmar 9, a joint research station on the edge of Confederation space, staffed by a rotating mix of 6 species, including, for the first time, a small human contingent of 11 scientists and a security detail of 4. Petty Officer Elena Cruz was one of the 4. She was 26 years old, unremarkable by human standards. No command experience, no combat record, 6 years in service doing mostly cargo escort and disaster relief. She'd volunteered for Ilmar 9 because the posting paid well, and she wanted to see something that wasn't Earth or the inside of a supply ship. Her file, which Vesic reviewed later with a growing, sick sort of dread, described her as steady, reliable, unremarkable under pressure. The Confederation had not fought a war in 400 years. This was a fact it was, in general, deeply proud of. It was also, as it turned out, a fact that left an entire generation of Confederation citizens with absolutely no practical idea of what to do when the Krivex remnant, a fragmented, desperate offshoot of a species the Confederation had quarantined a century earlier after a catastrophic bioweapons program, decided that a lightly defended research outpost was an acceptable place to steal a fusion core. They hit Ilmar 9 at 0340 station time, 41 raiders, outdated weapons, salvaged armor, and absolutely nothing left to lose, which made them more dangerous than any fleet the Confederation maintained, because the Confederation's entire military doctrine was built around the assumption that rational actors could be deterred. The Krivex raiders were not rational actors. They were starving. Station Commander Yelu Thras, a Farathi, calm, brilliant, utterly unprepared, did exactly what 400 years of doctrine told her to do. She opened a channel. She attempted negotiation. She offered supplies, medical aid, safe passage, anything short of the fusion core itself, because losing that core meant losing station power, and station power meant 11 civilian scientists in a facility with no atmosphere outside its walls. The raiders shot the comms officer mid-sentence and breached the outer ring 90 seconds later. Elena Cruz did not open a channel. Vesic pieced the timeline together afterward from station logs, security footage, and the testimony of the 7 scientists who survived. He would review it more times than was probably healthy for him, not out of morbid fascination, but because he genuinely could not make sense of it using any framework the Confederation had given him. At 0341, Cruz, off-duty, asleep in her quarters, was woken by the breach alarm. Station protocol required all personnel to proceed immediately to designated shelter pods and await security response. Cruz did not proceed to a shelter pod. She went to the security locker, retrieved a sidearm rated for 0 atmosphere combat that nobody had used outside of drills in the station's 4-year history, and moved toward the breach. "I have reviewed the footage," Vesic told the council 3 weeks later in the emergency session that would change the shape of the entire first contact assignment. "I need you to understand that what I am about to describe was not an isolated act of heroism from an exceptional individual. I have since confirmed, through extensive interviews with Terran Star Navy Command, that this is standard human behavior under this classification of threat. They have a term for it. They call it holding the line. Every human security officer interviewed described the same instinct, the same priorities, in nearly identical language, as though it had been..." He stopped. "As though it had been trained into an entire species," finished Counselor HFY quietly. "Yes, Cruz held the eastern corridor for 6 minutes against a squad of Kryvex raiders that outnumbered her 9-1, using corridor geometry, station lighting controls, and Vesic still found this detail almost impossible to process. The raiders' own desperation against them, drawing them into a section of corridor with a hull breach warning she'd triggered herself, betting correctly that the raiders would hesitate at the threshold in a way a trained soldier wouldn't. She was shot twice. She kept the corridor sealed anyway, buying 11 scientists and the rest of the station's civilian population the 4 minutes they needed to reach shelter pods. It was during the second wave, the one that breached the crew compartment where 2 unconscious human security officers lay pinned under collapsed decking, the one that opened half the compartment to vacuum, that the footage Vesic had watched 17 times took place. 4 seconds to reach the bulkhead. She used 3. Then she went back. The Confederation relief fleet arrived 11 minutes after the initial breach. A fast response by Confederation standards, an eternity by any other measure. By the time they docked, the raid was already over. Not because the raiders had been repelled by superior firepower, but because a species with no formal combat training, no military support, and outdated personal weapons had made the cost of taking Outpost Ilmar 9 so unacceptably high that the surviving 9 raiders retreated with the fusion core they'd come for, and nothing else. No hostages, no additional casualties, and notably, no desire whatsoever to return. Elena Cruz survived. Barely. She spent 4 months in a regenerative medical bay and would carry 2 permanent scars and a rebuilt left lung for the rest of her life. She would also, without ever intending to, become the single most consequential data point in the Confederation's entire 100-year evaluation of the human species. I want to be very clear about what I am not saying, Vesic told the assembled council, standing in the amphitheater where the fate of new species had been quietly decided for 11,000 years. I am not saying humans are more violent than us. Every metric we have says the opposite. Their crime rates, internally, have been in freefall for a century. They send more aid ships than warships. Their ambassadors have never once in 4 years threatened anyone in this chamber. He let that sit. What I am saying is that we assumed violence and protectiveness were the same instinct, pointed in different directions, and that a peaceful species would necessarily be a soft one. Humans have shown us that this is false. They built a civilization on the specific, deliberate practice of being extremely difficult to hurt, precisely so that they would rarely need to hurt anyone else. Every human institution, their militaries, their emergency services, their disaster relief networks, their culture, is optimized around a single question that none of our species have needed to ask in centuries. What do we do in the 6 minutes before help arrives? And the answer, said Counselor Ashivem slowly, is that one of them holds the line. The answer, Vesic said, is that all of them do. Cruz was not exceptional among humans. She was, by her own commander's assessment, unremarkable. That is what frightens me, Counselor. Not that a human did this, that every human we've interviewed since believes with total sincerity that they would have done the same. The vote to grant Earth full, immediate council membership, 29 years ahead of the standard evaluation period, passed by a margin that surprised everyone, including Vesic. Not because the council had stopped being cautious, because they had finally understood what they were dealing with, and caution, they realized, pointed in a direction they hadn't considered. Every species in the Confederation had learned, at some painful point in its history, to build walls against the void, against each other, against the parts of themselves that had once nearly ended them. Humans had learned to build walls too. They had simply also learned, at some point nobody could quite date, that the best wall was a person who chose to stand in the gap. Epilogue. Elena Cruz woke in a Confederation medical bay 4 months after Ilmar 9 to find a young alien fleet commander sitting by her bedside who had, according to the nurses, visited every single day. "You didn't have to do that," she said, when she'd finished reading his written statement to the council, the one that used her name 11 times and the word unremarkable exactly once, in a way that made it sound somehow like the highest compliment anyone had ever paid her. Vesic considered this for a long moment, "91 seconds," he said finally. "What?" "The gap between the breach alarm and you reaching the security locker. I've watched it. 91 seconds is how long it took you to decide. I keep trying to understand what happens in those 91 seconds, what you were thinking." Elena Cruz thought about it, really thought about it, for the first time since she'd woken up. "I wasn't thinking anything," she admitted. "I just knew the corridor was the way in, and somebody had to be the reason it wasn't." Vesic nodded slowly and wrote nothing else down, because he finally understood that some things did not translate into Confederation law or Council doctrine or 11,000 years of careful, hard-won peace. Some things you just had to watch a human do once to understand forever.